indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, get the meeting to order. I think the first thing we'll do is a update on the budget from Stephanie.
Good evening, everyone. Let me get back here. Okay. So I'm just going to go over some of the updates since last week. Basically, the big piece of our budget that we were waiting on was our health insurance increases. So I'm going to move on to there. So we received our preliminary rates back in January. We just received our final increases, our final health insurance increases this week on Monday. And you can see here that they are still substantial, but some of them have gone down. CDPHP, for example, our preliminary increase was actually 15%, which was massive increase. And fortunately, we were able to negotiate, or our consortium was able to negotiate for us. And the increase for next year is actually going to be only 5.1%. I say only, 5.1 is still a big increase, but it's nowhere close to 15%. So we're really happy about that. Looking to the Caremark RX side, we are seeing a 14% increase. Our preliminary number for that was 13.8. So that did go up a little bit, not much, but still 14% is a huge increase. And that's insurance, and that is a huge trend just across the country. That's not just us. We are on the list of districts that have a catastrophic member, which means that they have a claim of $150,000 or more for just one person on our prescription plan. So that's accounted in there. And then our Highmark, that is 7%, and that was actually the same as in our preliminary increases, that 7%. So that didn't change. But health insurance really continues to be a massive driver for us, cost driver. We've been seeing increases like this year to year, and that's really not sustainable. Our family plans are pushing $40,000 just for one family plan. So that's quite expensive for us. And we also have retirees still that pay $0 for their health insurance. And that's what just the contract they retired under. So that is a huge constraint for us, this health insurance. And then again, these pieces that we've gone over from, meeting to meeting, looking at our contractual salary increases for BTA. That's our teachers and teaching assistants. That's a 4.25% increase inclusive of STEP. CSEA, we're currently in negotiations right now. We're hoping to, have that settled up by the end of the school year. Of course, we had to add in our non-budgeted items for the current year. There's student needs. Students are just becoming needier in general. They're coming in needier, and that's a big increase for us. TRS and ERS costs. So TRS is the retirement system for our teachers, all of our certified staff members. So that teachers, administrators, teaching assistants. That's a percentage of salary that we pay for people's retirement. So that's a TRS. We're looking at 8.24% of salaries next year. And then ERS is for our non-certified staff members. So those are things like our bus drivers, our custodians, our secretaries. And that's actually 17.6% of salaries for next year. So that's substantially more than TRS. Right now, what's up in the air that you guys may have heard is maybe a possible Tier 6 change. So the state is considering revamping that Tier 6 and making it more favorable to bring people into the state to work, not only just on the teacher side, but also for the state jobs as well. They're hoping that if they, change Tier 6 and make it more favorable, we'll get teachers in, we'll get state workers in. But the problem with that is it will cost, of course, money. So right now, that is not included in this budget. The state budget has not been approved at this point. It's being pushed off. Usually they aim for April 1st, but they have an extender. So the state budget has not been approved. So this is something in there that quite possibly could happen or could not. So that's a piece that's kind of up in the air for us. Looking at VOTEC, we are seeing more kids going to these VOTEC programs. We are seeing a quite substantial increase next year of kids that are choosing to go to these programs like, culinary. So those are great, but of course they come with a cost. And then next year we are seeing debt service increase, but that's due to our current building project that we're finishing up. But that will be offset by building aid and a tax increase. So looking at the requested items that we've gone through during budget season, these are the items that were requested. I'm not going to read them all to you, but the red ones are not included in the budget as it stands and won't be added to the budget. The only one that is added is that additional AIS support in the form of an extra period for 2 teachers. And then when we look at budget reductions, through the budget process, we, went to our supervisors, we went to the administrators, we talked with our Board of Education and really worked through different scenarios. And these are the, as it stands, and this would not really won't change at this point. These are the items that are going to be reduced from the budget for next year. You'll see there's a lot of reductions in our O&M area, some O&M equipment, O&M contractual budget, grounds, materials, and supplies. We're also decreasing the technology device replacement line. But overall, technology, it is decreasing next year. But unfortunately, a lot of these different softwares and programs we use have had a substantial increase. So while our device budget's going down, some of the other areas are going up a little bit. Our Board of Ed has decided to cut their travel and conference, so that's $2,000 right there. We've cut a piece of educational instructional software. And then tonight, so the items in green were just reduced tonight at our audit and finance meeting. We were looking at about a $1.2 million gap in our budget. So we met with our Board of Education and we talked through some different areas where we might be able to reduce. And I don't know if Dr. Maloney wants to jump in, but we felt that these were the areas where, we could reduce with, no impact to people losing their jobs, which was really important to the Board of Education. So that's the REACH teacher. There'll be no replacement for 2 teaching assistants that are retiring at the end of the school year. And then this is a piece that was discussed when we first went to move from our AD being just a stipended position to like an actual full-time position, that we are looking to have that our AD teach 1 additional period, currently teaches 2. We'll move up to teaching 3 periods instead of paying somebody to teach an extra period. So currently, when you look at these budget numbers, these pieces were only, the items in green were only discussed tonight, so they're not in the following numbers because that was done beforehand. So, looking at our budget overview, so we did have a gap of about $1.2 million. We are planning on using about $970,000 of fund balance to close the gap. And again, we reduced those items here to close that gap as well. Okay, so looking at fund balance, I think what's really most important, to look at is that our district is conservative, and I think we've done a good job at, finding ways to save money, but we're definitely not hoarding money here. We are actually 13th lowest out of 83 districts in the Greater Capital Districts, in the Greater Capital District, in terms of fund balance as a percentage of the budget. So we're 13th lowest. So that just shows you that, we've done a good job at, allocating money to close this gap. We've used that money to, have capital projects that don't have as much of a tax impact. But really, I think this goes to show that, we are really, we're not hoarding money here, but we're in a decent spot. But we don't really want to go any lower than this because, once you use fund balance, if you start depending on it, you're going to keep depending on it, and then it's going to go away. So this, my recommendation that the board has taken is keeping the use of fund balance for next year under $1 million, fund balance and reserves. And like I said, we're going about $970,000, which is under that $1 million. I think one of the big pieces we were really tasked with is really understanding that if you don't make small reductions now, you'll be looking at catastrophic reductions in the future. So we, as the admin team and Board of Education came together, and those were the strategic reductions that we're looking to make so that we don't have this happen, because we don't want to 3 years from now come in and have to gut the budget and cut 20 positions. That would not be great. So of course, insurance continues to be a major cost driver again for us. And then we've got some areas of revenue that are likely to decrease, like our interest revenue. The Wine and Skill merger did go through. So that's a piece of our budget, that we depend on the revenue side. Wine and Skill does pay us tuition to come here if they choose us. So that won't be an option come to the future. So that's something that we'll have to take into consideration. And if you look at back at our 5-year plan, which our fiscal advisors, Bernie Nottingham office, presented earlier this year, we'll be running a deficit as early as possibly this year, which does signal financial distress. And again, once you're dependent on using fund balance, unless you make some significant change, like significantly making reductions, or if you were to come into significant revenue, which isn't likely because we're just dependent on basically state aid and tax increases, then you will still be dependent on that, and it will go away eventually. And again, when you look at this, like I said, we're 13th lowest out of 83 districts in the capital region, greater capital region. So this is something that we do have to be mindful of. And I think that's about it. So we will be looking on April 21st to approve the budget. Anyone want to add anything?
First of all, does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Fanning? I just want to share a few things. First of all, thank you very much for putting this together and presenting all the scenarios. And I know it's a very difficult time for the district because no reductions are good. And just trying to mitigate the consequences of reductions, I very much appreciate. So a few things I want to mention about this particular budget. One, it preserves positions, for people. That's important. It preserves all student clubs and activities, including all sports. So there's no reduction in that area. It holds on to our SRO for one other year. And as you can see, it's fiscally sound and it's very, very conservative. But the points are really important to make. And I want to mention this to the students. Our tax cap this year is 3.55. If you look at the increases in health insurance, they're all significantly above 3.55. So it's impossible to raise enough money to cover just normal expenses. That's why you have to start reducing things, because you can't raise enough money to pay for just the things that we have now. That's the tricky part. So that's one of the consequences of the tax cap. I did poll my Rensselaer County superintendent colleagues. I do know of at least one district going significantly above the tax cap. They're almost 3 times what our tax cap is going to be. And the rest of them are going at the tax cap. And I think in the future, you're going to see many districts go far past the tax cap just to hold on to program, because they're not going to be able to maintain it over time. Because as Mrs. Fanning said, once you use fund balance, you can't rely upon it. And the only way you can do it is by taxes. We don't have major industry in our district. All the new things going in on Hoosick Street, that's Troy City School District. So they get all the tax revenue for that. We pretty much have Stewart's. And that just doesn't generate homes, and small businesses don't generate the tax revenue that some of the big, your Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, and things like that. So that's where we're at a little bit of a disadvantage. But we continually are one of the lowest cost per student in the area. And that's not because we don't care about students, because we budget very fiscally sound. We use our money very well.
Yeah, I'd just like to invite the rest of the board if folks have anything they want to add. I know, Zach, I think you want to share some thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And first off, I do want to say that I think the staff and I think the board has worked really hard to get this budget where it's at. Throughout the process, I've been opposed to a couple of major aspects to this budget, and I want to make sure that's clear publicly too. That drawing from our reserves on a year-by-year basis is hurting us down the road. I think it's a bad position to be in for us. The consequence of that is either we draw from our reserves or we're cut services for the students, which means lower quality education for our students. I think that's a really bad thing to balance right there. And I know the rest of the board feels like that's a tough balance too. But as we look down the road, I don't see how we can live within this tax cap every year, year after year. So what I mean is increasing our budget by less than 3.5% every year is a really tough position. And it means either we're robbing the future in our reserves or we're robbing the future in our education services. Neither of those are good. So I would advocate for going over the tax cap while also acknowledging that our community has had a lot and that fiscally it's a challenge, right? We don't all have a ton of money. But I do think that's a better position for our students and making sure they have a high quality education going into the future.
Thank you, Zach. Anyone else want to share any thoughts on the budget? I mean, I'll just add one thing, which, oh, no, John, you go ahead.
No, so just to sort of piggyback off what Zach said, I do think that we can't sustain this. So I would not be opposed to going over the tax cap. I think based on the vote that we got, the second vote last year, if we could get that vote again this year at the tax cap, and we could get 70+% to come out and say, then I think the following year it has to be a real option to go above the tax cap for the following year's budget. But if the rest of the board wanted to go above it, to Zach's point, I wouldn't oppose that this year either.
So I think the one thing I would just add, because I feel like budgets for all of us is a continuing education every year. School budgets are unique in how they're set up. But yeah, we got some good news on health insurance, right? It only went up 5% for CDPHP. Reality is though still, and sometimes it's hard to see it in the numbers, pulling $1 million out of our fund balances, really our reserves. This is, we have our budget and this is all the money we have left. So there's $6 million that we have essentially set aside. You can't replace $1 million in a year. Once you use that money, it's gone for a while. And the more you kind of bring it down, you're facing kind of that catastrophic situation really quickly. I say that because, to John's point, there are things in the budget that are just really expensive. Having an SRO, for instance, is expensive. It's an additional expense that's beyond education, student activities, sports, et cetera. So it's something that we have to be mindful of. And I think as we look to the years ahead, whether it's looking at how much the tax cap is, how much more we can go above it, are there any changes happening at the state level? It really becomes critical that we're all involved and that we're talking to our elected officials and saying, I think Angelina's point is always well heard. Why is a student in one district worth essentially more than a student in our district? And I don't know about the students in the room, but I hope no one feels like they're worth less than someone at, Schenectady or Albany. I'd like to think that we're all pretty much equal. So just try to keep all that in context because these are really tough decisions. Thankfully, we're preserving people. No one's losing a job, but at some point, those are the kind of decisions we're going to have to make, and none of us are going to enjoy that. So please continue to reach out to your elected officials and get the investment in education that we need.
I'll be working with our communication specialist to put out a post where people can reach out to their elected officials. Although, we've put together a sound budget, I think you have to layer it over time. And I do think the SRO is, we love to have Kyle, but I do think that that's something that over time becomes really challenging in terms of what do you have? And I do believe the community should be helping to support that. I think it's a form of community policing. It's clear to me the community wants an SRO, which is why it's included in this budget. But again, over time, long-term sustainable. The state doesn't fund us on non-educational things. So things like sports, things like the SRO, those aren't things that you get money for. So those are the things you have to advocate for, in my opinion.
Anyone else? All right. That brings us to approval of the minutes. Anyone have any questions, concerns, edits? No. All right. So all in favor of approving the minutes from last meeting? All right, that passes. That brings us to the updates from the administrators.
All right, we're going to start with Miss Lanu, but I do want to mention that Mrs. Honorato is unable to be with us tonight because she's hosting the first ever UPK Parent Information Night. Last week, I believe she had the kindergarten night, and it's been really well received by people. So that's where she is. But I will turn it over to you.
I just have a couple of things, seeing as how we've seen each other every 2 weeks. We've got a good rhythm going here. I do want to just point out that the Harlem Wizards are coming back on May 12th. I'm going to be putting information about how to obtain tickets for that in my newsletter tomorrow, and I think that Mrs. Honorado will be doing something similar with her newsletter. But I did want to put that out there because I know it's something that was a big hit with the community and our students when they came before, and they'll be coming back in the springtime. So that will be in my newsletter tomorrow and probably after April break as well, just to make sure people have the opportunity to purchase those tickets for their families. We are starting CBT testing, our computer-based testing for New York State. After April break, on the Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll have our first round of testing. So we're just getting students prepared for that. And that's just another thing that I'll be mentioning in my newsletter that, we want to make sure that families and students especially are prepared to come ready to take those tests. And one of the biggest hurdles with computer-based testing is charging your Chromebooks. And so that's one of those messages that I'll be putting out. So anybody who's listening from home, gotta charge those Chromebooks so that they're able to last throughout the exams. And that is all I have tonight because Ms. Wilson, our student representative, has quite a bit that she wants to share, and I want to make sure that she has that opportunity. Ms. Gallo, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure, I have things to add. One thing I want to talk about is just kind of this week, our life skills class, they recently did a food truck unit where students created menus, they priced items, and they actually invited staff to kind of purchase food. And it really was a great way for them to build real world skills with planning, functional math skills, their social communication, they greeted customers, they took orders. I think Angelina went and purchased some.
I ate at the Rusty Spoon.
Rusty spoon.
It was called, or maybe the Rusty Spatula. Either way, it was rusty.
But it really was just a nice way to kind of, tie together their independence and just those vocational readiness kind of in a meaningful way. We're hoping to maybe get a food truck here so they can actually go out and purchase things themselves, something we're kind of talking about. Our unified basketball team also had their first practice yesterday, so after the break, we'll go have some games. I worked with our school psychologists and our counselors on the special education master schedule, many of whom are sitting back here. They joined us today. That's always, it's very challenging, Paula knows, to kind of sit in the room and go over just making sure that we have everything we need on the schedule in terms of classes and sections for all students. I would say that our CSE meetings were about halfway through, thank goodness. Just talking about kids programming and planning for next year. I've done a couple of out-district visits, so we have students who are not here at Tamarack. I've gone to Wine and Skill to visit a student. We also saw 2 students who are at George Washington, one of our BOCES programs last week. We're going to start going on preschool visits for incoming kindergarten students. So if there are kindergartners coming in who have special needs, we like to go out to their preschools and kind of get eyes on them before they come in. Last week, we had a regional CSE chairpersons meeting, and my 2 secondary psychologists came with me, which is great because they often help me out with chairing meetings, and working with Paula on testing accommodations. And lastly, just figuring out coverage. We have a social worker who's going out on maternity leave, so we had to work with a psychologist to make sure that all of our counseling services were covered in her absence, because we do have many students with mental health needs.
Thank you. Because we've met so often, I don't have a tremendous amount of updates, but I do have a couple of things that I think will be very positive. One, I just want to announce that the Board of Education and myself have nominated Lori Lewis, who is the president of the PTSA, for the CASDA Friends of Education Award, and she was selected and will be honored. So we'll have a post about that and information, and it's a dinner that everybody can go to. And I think everybody can say she was absolutely instrumental last year in the communication and helping message some of the budgeting information, amongst the many other things she does for our students. So very much appreciate that. And I do want to let you know there is a PTA meeting later this month, but on the 6th of May, the meeting will be at Hill Creek, and we'll be talking about budget at that time. And I think several Board of Education members will be there, and the public is invited to attend. Capital project update. As many of you are anxiously awaiting trying to find my notes here. The track. We are working on it as long as the weather will cooperate. And if I could just find my notes here. We hope to break ground next week. One of the biggest problems with the track is that you need to have a consistent number of days of 55 degrees and above, and basically no moisture in the air. And as you look at the weather, that's why we didn't break ground this week, because the epoxy that they use to actually complete the track, they can't bring it on site if the weather is particular temperature. So it's a really precarious situation. The work is also going to continue on the turf field, which is, the natural turf field, which is behind the elementary school. The irrigation will be laid, the turf will be laid down, and then you can't go on it for approximately a year. So even though in a few short weeks, it'll look great, it'll look like a perfect pristine golf course lawn, we actually can't go on it because you need to have the roots take place. But I think over time, it'll be really strong. There's going to be irrigation, so it'll be something that will be worth the wait. The kids are currently on the new artificial turf. They'll have to get off of it once the track gets put in, but hopefully it'll go really quick once the that starts. So,
2 weeks, maybe 3.
yeah, I mean,
depending on weather.
in a perfect world, it'd be 10 days, but that would be, it's 65 every day and not a drop of rain. The problem with the rain is you could have 1 day of rain and it actually takes you offline for 2 different days because you get the day that it's raining that you can't do anything and then the next day to dry everything out. So I want to be optimistic because our goal is for the kids to have their last track meet on there. And I think we can attain that goal. But if we get a string of bad weather, that'll be a little bit tough. So there's not much other than just praying for good weather. The front of the building, you'll notice that the metal canopy, the work is beginning. And I believe tomorrow they're going to be putting in the metal railing. So little tiny things that are very important to ADA in compliance and safety updates. They're coming one little bit at a time. Next week's going to be a big week for us. All the new fire alarms and messaging system will be tested. And if you are driving by the district, you're going to hear alarms going off for literally the next 6 days, and they're going to be loud. But it's testing the system so that make sure that it's online. And there was a huge investment in that. But I think the security and fire alarm system and the safety system will be worth it. And lastly, and somewhat related, I am working with Kevin McCormick, who is our operations and maintenance director, on our building condition surveys. New York State requires districts to put in a building condition survey every 5 years. And what that is to say that the buildings are in sufficient shape and the equipment that's in them, and to rank it by how good of shape they're in. For example, like is your boiler end of life? Is your roof in good shape? And the reason they do that is they want to make sure that the districts are spending their money the appropriate ways and that you're not going to have a catastrophic failure of one of the main systems and not have the money for it. And in going through it today, the last 2 capital projects plus the $100,000 projects that we've been doing for the last 10 years have really put us in decent shape. The one thing that I will note that we're unable to do is the parking lot. The parking lot is millions of dollars, and that'll be something that we have to look at in the future, but we continue to patch it up. But it's definitely something that's going to be on the radar for a little while. That's it for me.
Thank you. All right. Last night was the spring concert, which my brother and a lot of close friends and a lot of my peers performed at, which was nothing short of perfect. I want to know who they hired to get the lightning and thunder as their outro, but it was amazing. It was amazing. Tomorrow is the honors breakfast, which is always very highly anticipated. I don't know what's on the menu, but bagels. There you go. The other day we were served baked potatoes with toppings of our choice for lunch. I only heard good things from people who tried it, and it's very nice to see that Miss Jackson Lands' efforts are proving to be heavily paying off. Prom tickets are on sale after break. This year it's hosted at the Troy Country Club. And with break coming up, everything's been, wrapping up. It's really slow. At Questar, everybody is as wrapping up for the end of the year though. And personally, our CNA program, we are getting ready for our Prometrics, which is the test, which is going to be based on all of our 23 skills that we've been learning throughout the year. So that's all for me.
So you are one of the members of CTE, and the board makes a significant investment in those programs. What are your thoughts on it? Do you think it was good for you? How did it impact you?
I mean, I've learned everything and more. I mean, well, not everything. There's a lot that I have to learn. But I mean, at first when I heard that we were going to clinicals, I didn't really know what to think. Like, okay, cool, we're going somewhere, we're gonna learn. But I didn't think that the people that we meet there, I didn't think those are people that I would connect with, people who would be like interested in leading me in the right direction, showing me things, like building my confidence. And I guess I kind of didn't really think of the social aspect of that. So it's been very nice,
So you think
actually.
it's a good investment?
A very good investment.
All right, that brings us to our committee and liaison updates. Zach, I think you had two, correct? One on facilities.
Yeah, just two quick notes. One, I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Maloney for a tour of the school last week that was extended to the board, and I was very thankful to be able to be there. And I just wanted to share a couple of things that I thought were really exciting. For one, I like toys. I like tools a lot. I got to go down and see the boilers with Kevin McCormick. I really appreciated that. It wasn't scary. Well, not to me. You haven't seen my farm, I think. But I also went over to the elementary school and saw the boilers there. One of the things that I thought was a great takeaway that maybe the community wouldn't know is that the volatility and risk with a new boiler system means that we don't have staff that has to stay here all night during really nasty nights to make sure that things don't shut off. And I'm not saying he does that all the time. I'm saying that's where it's been sometimes when there's a storm. And that's what happened at Hoosick Falls, where somebody left at 10 p.m. to go home after a long day. And at 1 a.m., a pipe burst and caused a ton of damage to the school. So new systems do make that a lot better. So, and I just like the chance to see all the toys down there. Also, I got to see the bleachers and the state of those, which I know is a concern that a lot of folks have. I saw a lot of the improvement to the hallways and maybe some improvement to go down the road, but I thought everything looked great. We have a really, really wonderful school, which you guys already know. The students are so friendly here, which I was really impressed with. And I think Dr. Maloney knows every kid by name, I'm pretty sure, which I was impressed with and didn't expect. Growing up, I knew my superintendent a little bit. It was a small community. He definitely didn't know all of us by name, and I'm not sure he cared, but that was a different time, 40 years ago. Also, I got to see the kitchens, which I'm a farmer. I love food. I like food anyway. So it was great to see that. The facilities are wonderful there. It's immaculate. And I think the staff there is doing a really good job. The meals looked really tasty too, and it smelled awesome whenever I walked in there. So I just wanted to say thank you again, Dr. Maloney, for that time, and for Kevin too. And please extend my thanks to him for taking the time out of his day for doing it. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was just to the board up here. There is an event coming up I went to last year. It was a really great event. NISBA, which is the New York State School Board Association, it's a long acronym, has a leadership and education event locally, which we could drive to. It's only $100, $105. In fact, I had a wonderful time there last year, but I also learned a lot. And I think as a board, how do we learn to be a better board? How do we see what's happening in the world and find solutions to the really big challenges that we have as a district? And it's by collaborating with other people and listening and educating ourselves. So I do hope the rest of the board will find time for that. We're paying out of pocket now. I'm okay with that, but it is $100. So I hope you guys can all spring that and make that work for you. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Zach, thank you for the tour. And I'm in the building every day. I've been in for many, many years. But what this tour gave me an opportunity was to connect the two big capital projects that we've done recently and just showcase the amount of work that's happened over the last 6 years, actually, because I think it was 2020 when we started the previous project. And this district has made substantial investments into the long-term facility and the stability. And I think that's to be impressed, which is impressive because when you're going into tough fiscal times, you don't have the extra money to take care of the roof and take care of those things. And I'm thankful that you've had the foresight to upgrade the kitchens, upgrade those kind of things so that now you're not in a catastrophic situation where the roof is falling in, et cetera. So I think you ought to be really proud of yourself and I'm welcome any tour, anytime. It was great to take them through and I'm glad you saw how awesome our kids were.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other committee updates? One thing I would just note, because I know it's come up a couple times and I'm out of my league here on athletics, but do want to highlight that hockey is included in the budget. I know that's been a topic of significant concern, was on the list at one point to be considered for removal, but one, better than expected health insurance increases, and two, obviously a lot of folks are interested in playing. So make sure to sign up. The more kids we have in it, the better it looks.
You can do policy.
Yeah. For policy, I just wanted to mention we're reviewing the use of facilities tonight. We upgraded the policy to include the turf field and do's and don'ts and things we can't allow in the turf field. So that'll be in the section later on tonight.
Thanks, Kevin. Anything else? Okay. Brings us to section 7. We have a couple special actions here. Open it up for any conversation or discussion first. Angelina, do you want to just provide some background, especially on the seeker?
Sure. 7.1 is a very small and modest additional compensation for some substitutes that come in daily. And as a recognition for the fact that they're going to come in and do whatever position we need, we just adjusted their salary, and that's what 7.1 is. 7.2 is SECRA, and it's a required environmental impact statement that the board has to adopt on a project. You do this for every capital project. We do have the Tamarack Terrace, which will be done by volunteer work, but it still is a project. It's a small change to the environment around here, so the board does have to adopt it. But it's a level 2, which basically means it's not going deep. It's basically ground surface, and the formal language is just litigious that has to be adopted.
Yeah, and again, thank you to the PTSA for the donation that's making that happen, as well as coordinating the volunteers to do the work. I know it's a lot of individual effort too, and individuals donating equipment, time, material. So thank you. Seeing that these are not really complex actions, I'll just put them both up. All in favor of approving 7.1 and 7.2? All right, the ayes have it. All right, Kevin, that brings us to section 8. Do you want to talk about any more details on the policy?
Sure, I can just mention a couple highlights. For the turf field, there's several things that are prohibited, specifically candy, food, seeds, things we can't have on the turf that are going to actually damage it. We can't get out. We're also prohibiting pets from entering the field for hygiene reasons, and a few other things. No motorized vehicles. We can't have scooters or anything out there, obviously. No tent stakes. Obviously, we can't have tobacco or any illegal drugs or vapes. And that pretty much covers most of it, I believe.
Yeah, I think the other thing just to note, and we love our animals, but dogs would absolutely tear up and ruin the turf field. So the district has made a significant investment in having that for a long time. So we really do have to do our best to keep it for the authorized use only. We love our community. We love that our community loves our space. We just have to be really careful about that, or we're going to destroy a large investment.
And I just want to add, most of these recommendations aren't things we came up with on our own. These are highly recommended from the turf manufacturers or the people providing the turf to us for the longevity and the safety of the kids.
And, other school districts' policies as well. So borrowing from everything that's out there.
How are we monitoring this? Because we are having cameras. Okay. Because I know
I'm glad you asked that. We're going to have some, again, you're requiring that people are making good judgment, but we are going to have some updated signage to let them know that the grounds are under surveillance at all time. And if there was substantial violations to this, we would have to do what we would have to do. I mean, this is such a substantial investment. Like, for example, if somebody drove a vehicle onto the turf field, you're ruining it. So, just to make sure, we don't want to lock it for the community, so we're hoping people do the right thing.
right. Well, I just know that, I do run on the track a lot, and I can't tell you how many times I see parents with their kids and they have scooters and bikes on the track, and it's, what do you do?
Here's what I hope we don't have to do, which is lock it off to the community. I don't think anybody wants that, but I think if we saw substantial violations, the board would have to make a decision about how do we preserve this? We wouldn't let just people run through the building with a vehicle. We have to treat the outside that way too.
Yeah, I would say 2 highlights too. The policy revisions are very clear with outside groups around insurance, that it is absolutely mandated. The other thing I would say just to everyone in general is if you see something, you're like, that's not the right thing to do, say something, because that damage can be permanent and, the investment can be lost very quickly. So just like at the airport, if you see something, say something. applies at the field too.
And by say something, maybe not necessarily to the individual, but to an authority figure.
Oh, yeah, that
So,
too. Yeah,
Just
well said.
Maybe we'll have some sort of reporting mechanism on there. I will say this, and I was looking to Kyle, our new camera system that we've put in as part of this capital project is incredible. And if there is an incident or a situation, he can get license plates, faces, there's all sorts of things. So when it's under surveillance, it's not a grainy photo. It is something that we could turn over to the police if we had to. I hope we don't ever have that situation, but would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's very clear, even when you zoom in, like initially when you're watching it live and zoom in, it gets pixelated. But if you cut that video out and then watch it, it's crystal clear.
I'm deeply worried about the e-bikes or whatever the heck you call those things. We've had our challenges. We even had a parent call this morning about kids riding e-bikes in the area of our school district. So it's something that Kyle is working with kids. Miss Lanu has some concerns too, but it's noted on this policy because it could destroy the turf. But you might find it in a student handbook that they're completely outlawed soon just because the kids aren't making the best choices. You guys, want to add anything on the?
E-bikes are a gray area still in New York State. So I've been trying to look up research as much as I possibly can. They just still sit in a weird area because they're not a bicycle, but they're not a motorized vehicle, even though they have a motor. But New York State hasn't caught up with that language yet. So it's hard to really implement anything. The school can ban them on here, so the kids can't drive them on, but it's not saying they're going to do it anyway. But we just got to try to figure out what they are when they do it.
We're also trying to educate them because we've had some circumstances where kids were not on school property, like driving around school buses and stuff. Not only is that dangerous for the school buses, but clearly that's not a good choice anywhere. So when Kyle has a situation like that, he'll call them down and just kind of try to implore upon them.
Try to educate them on BTL so that they know what can actually happen. Because they can still get tickets. Try to educate them a little bit.
So this is the first reading. The next meeting we have, which is I think the 16th or the 19th, we'll adopt it, and then that'll go immediately into policy.
But again, please do share any feedback if you find anything that needs further revision. But I think it's, Kevin, great job with that. All right, that brings us to section 9, the student placement recommendations. Any discussion needed on this?
I think Ms. Gallo updated. I just want to thank the special education department. This is a really busy time of year, and I think the parents and the students feel heard and their needs are being met. So I appreciate that.
All right, all in favor of approving those placements, 9.1? All right, that's approved. Brings us to a curriculum change request. Any discussion needed here?
Yes, we have a shared decision-making system in our district, and we have a social emotional learning subcommittee of teachers, faculty, and staff that work together to propose a change. We have a curriculum that we got a grant for and that it is expiring. So this is a replacement. The one thing I want to note is that we're a little unsure of the actual cost yet. It's very, very modest, but it's through teacher pay teacher. So we just have to work out the mechanism. There's a cost noted on there of $400. It might be a little bit more than that, but I think that's a modest cost for something that the teachers greatly desire. So we'll work through. So you're approving the actual curriculum. We'll work on the prices later.
Any questions? No. All right, all in favor of approving 10.1? Approved. All right, that brings us to the superintendent's recommendations around personnel. Anything you want to highlight, Angelina?
I don't think so. These are pretty standard. It's this time of year where we've just got some changes towards the end of the year and some coaches.
All right, well, approved by consent 11.1 through 11.7. All in favor? All right, those pass as well. All right, that takes us to the business and finance updates. I'll just check, and I know these are a lot of reports. Any questions that the board had in terms of reviewing? Nope. Any comments?
No, I mean, I do have to thank our construction manager that have kept the change orders really down to a minimum. I really very much appreciate that because these things can really get out of hand and they're keeping the budget modest. So this is we've had under 10 change orders thus far, which is really great for a project this size. I really encourage the board members on 12.1 to continue to regularly look at the financial reports. That's going to give you a status quo of where we are throughout the year. are we overspending our budget? Are we underspending? Where does that leave you? And certainly ask for any help if you need be. The 12.2, the single audit corrective action, that sounds really bad. It's really not. It's any time that they pick a singular item to audit, and they always find some kind of a recommendation on it. So that's just, we have to write back and tell them how we might be able to attend to whatever the thing is. But as you have noticed in the past, we get very, very clean audits. The business office does a tremendous job of following the rules.
Danielle, anything you want to add on some of the conversations we've had on the construction side?
No, and Angelina actually
Summarized well.
summarized the whole meeting. I had it all written down, but
I'm
she did a
sorry.
good job. No, that's okay.
I just, want to emphasize, the board has been very vocal about making sure things get done
Yeah.
on time and as early as possible. So I'm sure people either listening or in the room feel, man, when can we use it? It looks like it's done.
Yep,
We
no,
have the same anxiety.
yes, we do have the same anxiety, but we had a really productive meeting, so.
We'll do a really good job with explaining to people like, okay, it's offline, here's why it's offline right now and the number of days. But, the more people can just get the word off that if we just take care of this is going to last us a long time. And I think that's really important.
All right. All in favor of approving 12.1.1 through 12.5? All right, approved. Very good. That brings us to, well, actually, hold on one second. Is that something we need to?
Now's a good time.
So one item for discussion, which is not on the agenda, and before we get to public comment, is the location of the budget vote. As you may recall, last year, our first vote was in the multi-purpose gym. And then for the second vote, we moved it over to the elementary cafeteria, et cetera. So right now, it was selected to go back to the multi-purpose gym. Some of us felt like it was more productive and effective having it at the elementary school. So we wanted to have a discussion because we have room to change. There's still time in the timeline to change it, but we do really need to make that decision tonight. So invite any discussion and comments on that. Danielle?
I feel like it was, I feel like the elementary was, what's the word I'm looking for? I just feel that's the best location. It's where a lot of the parents are. PTSA has a good setup behind the school. I'm not sure what they're looking to do again this year, but that's where the traffic is. And I don't know, I just feel it was a home run when we had it there. So I'm in favor for it being over the elementary.
Other perspectives?
Yeah, I agree with Danielle, 100%. The only concern I had as we discussed this initially is, and maybe Dr. Maloney has some thoughts is, obviously the last time when we had the revote, we were able to do it because it was a half day or something, right? So it didn't affect lunch for the kids. Do we have any ideas on that? If we can solve that, I think it's a home run to put it at the elementary school.
I would have to put it in a space, and I've already started speaking to Mrs. Honorato about this. If the board did go in this direction, it would have to be somewhere into the building, which, to be honest, I don't love it. I don't love people walking through the building. We'll obviously have security and, like tape or something that people can only walk to where specifically it is. I think if you make a move to move it, you're going to have to really market why you're moving it so that people don't think that it's like an attempt to have a certain population not vote. And just try to make it as warm and welcoming as possible. We'll work through anything, but I just think the rationale and the why is important.
I have a question so when we do give back days for snow, do they have to be full days? Or can we do 2 half days for one day?
I think they have to be full days because of the days, because you have to have a certain number of days and a certain number of hours. But the calendar was already adopted to tell people when those give back days
Okay,
were.
so we can't change that?
I don't think it would be a great idea.
Okay, great idea or not allowed?
I would have honestly,
Because those are
I don't know.
two
I'd have
different
I'd have
things.
to look at the calendar to see. I'd have to look at the calendar and
Okay.
look some things up.
Because I mean, I understand the safety of our kids is absolutely foremost. But, I mean, is it a huge deal if, the kids eat in their classroom for one day
We wouldn't,
or
Yes.
something? Because I mean, I remember that's what we used to do in elementary school in the 1800s. So,
that, yes.
You too,
yes.
Tammy.
okay, yeah, right? I mean, we would have craft fairs set up in the gym and it was the biggest deal because we got to eat in our classroom. So is there an alternative
We would-
or?
I'm thinking right now it would have to be the library or one of the gyms to be least impactful on students and staff. But
Okay,
the cafeteria was nice because it was closest to the door, so people didn't have to walk very far. But I mean, we'll work out whatever. We're gonna solve a problem.
what about a tent and having it outside?
I think that might.
Could
make
we
them-
do that?
That would make them really mad. I don't know if the.
I think change is hard for people, in general.
Well, I
I'd
understand.
rather it not be in the building personally, but I don't know. if
I
that's
understand the change, but they've already been there once, so we've already kind of crossed that hurdle. I think if you kind of ping pong back and forth, that, I don't know, would it, we've already gotten there once. So I think if we continue on the path of,
Didn't we have a half day last year? That
We-
was
we-
the
yep.
difference, I think.
no, I know, but what I'm saying is we've had them in the high school, then we brought them in the elementary. Now we're gonna put them back in the high school. If we keep them in the elementary, we've already gotten them over there. We've already done it once. So, I don't know, it's just,
And what about parking? What is your thought on parking?
I think I shared this with Ware. I mean, honestly, it's, in my opinion, it's just my opinion only, I think the parking is better at the multipurpose gym because there's just kind of dedicated parking that's close to that. We can dedicate some space, some parking there, but they just have to walk a little bit farther. So again, if we're prepared for just answering the questions, that's totally fine, whatever the. Mrs. Devine, did you want to say something about this?
Would you like me to wait during public comment? Or
You might as well just say it now.
my face might say it, but I think I'm speaking on behalf, maybe boldly on behalf of a lot of the elementary school teachers. I would be really shocked if elementary school teachers were in support of this. I think I definitely don't think we could change the calendar days. That would be, if you take a full day that we're off and make it 2 half days, that puts us back in session for 2 days where we have a 180-day instructional school year. So I don't think we could do that for one. 2, the safety of our students is our utmost priority. Having adults coming in and out of the building is very difficult. There's a lot more that goes into moving lunch into a classroom than just changing a location. It's supervision. I think if Kelly were here, she could speak to. It's a bit of a logistical nightmare to do it during the school day. And the traffic and the parking is a big issue too. A lot of concern with the way that people drive through the entire loop of the school. There's really no parking there, people coming in and out throughout the day. So I would just encourage you to think a bit about the fallout, the safety of the students, the logistics. There's a lot more to consider. And I do know it wasn't well received by some public on Facebook last year that there was concern that it was being moved to hide the vote, which I certainly don't think is the case by any means. It was not your intention, and I don't think, but it is out there. So I would just consider maybe talking to Kelly. There's just a lot more at play than just changing a location.
I think one of the points that Danielle made earlier, which was to capture those elementary parents, which was easier to do when it was in the elementary building. But John had a suggestion that if, when working with the PTSA about activities, if we could have one of the activities wherever the vote is, wherever that may be, to draw people over that way. Again, I'm going to do whatever vote, whatever place you decide, I'm happy to. So, but we.
parking's still gonna be a nightmare.
We don't allow anybody except the voters to park in that side parking lot, and they can go right in and right out.
Where do the kids park that day?
Longer too.
Well over near the track. We move them over that way.
I would suggest moving forward that we absolutely make the day of the budget a half day.
I thought that's what we were
I,
supposed to do.
yeah, like maybe not a day off, but it it definitely should be a half day going forward, like save one of those days. I mean, do we have the capability of just, of calling a half day at this, like, I guess, what can we do?
I have to look at the calendar. You have to have a certain number of hours and a certain number of days. So Mrs. Devine was correct. If you cut a day
Right,
off,
that makes, right.
you don't get the right number of days. I'd be cautious about changing the calendar now. I just wouldn't want to irritate anyone. So I'm just.
No, but
you know,
I would just, going forward, I would highly recommend that the day of the budget absolutely in this district be a half day.
And I know, Kelly had mentioned at the last meeting that she was going to do that math training. Can we do the math training that day and get the kids out before lunch?
No, it's a 2-hour delay.
It's only a 2-hour delay.
John, in fairness, I thought it was a half day too. So apparently you and I misheard the same thing.
Just to add, I think the voter turnout, you may feel it was the location. I think it was absolutely the advocating and the fear of not passing the budget, that drove that, not so much.
No, I was here, Tammy and I were here that day. There was people over the elementary that just when we were walking around because we spent 3 hours over there, just walking around, people,
The
We're-
original budget.
they're like, no, we're not walking over. We're not gonna walk over. Like, I can't tell you how many times I heard that. And if people would have just walked over, that original budget would have passed. And that's why we were like, we need to move the budget vote over there. So that was the original, that's why the second one we moved over there, and going forward, that was supposed to be the plan, was to set it up over there, because you got little kids and, after they do all their activities and everything, and their parents are like, we're tapped. Like, the kids are running around. They don't want to come walk over here. They just want to get in their car and go. So it was like, okay, how do we get this over there and capture those parents? So that was the thought process behind that.
Encourage your parents to vote while they're still in our care.
I have a quick question. So how many years, I wasn't always over, I always voted, but how many years was it held at the elementary school and how many years has it been held here at the high school? I'm just thinking about I understand continuity, but what's the history of it?
It was either in the auditorium lobby or the multipurpose gym. It was moved to the multipurpose gym to keep it more isolated from students, to keep the public out of the general population of kids if it's a day that there's school. And over at the elementary school, just this one time, which was the second revote at the suggestion of some folks to get more.
And just to clarify, your recommendation as superintendent is that we continue to do it here at the high school?
I don't want to kind of get in the middle of a board thing,
Yeah.
but it would be, I think the faculty and staff would prefer it to be at the secondary school. But I understand the desire to move it over to the elementary school. It's just, there's not a great place to get people in and out parking wise, which is a challenge.
And I just want to say, I understand what they're saying, like with the kids at the safety, and, you don't want to disrupt their day. I think when we were discussing at the end of last year and the vote, it was, and I'm sure, there's a lot going on, so it probably was forgotten, but the hopes was to either have no school or half day on this day, so we were able to keep it over in the elementary. That was, the hopes of the plan. So just to capture the vote, so.
Yeah, and I totally appreciate that. And I also feel like if there's more information that maybe changes this, that'd be great. But I don't know. It feels like this is all the information we have. And we really can't make a decision about whether it is or is not going to be a half or full day. It feels like it's kind of, as a board, out of our hands. And that's not disagreeing with you or with John.
Just to add, right now it's on record as going to be held at the multipurpose gym. If we want to formally recommend a change, we'd need a motion for that, and then we would take a vote on that motion.
What is the last possible, what it would be our deadline to make the change?
I believe the notification is 45
45.
days. It's got to go in the paper like 4 times or some archaic type rule.
Yeah, like literally today is kind of our last chance to change it.
10 minutes ago?
So I do agree that the elementary school is the better location. I don't like personally the fact that students will be in session during that time frame. I think the safety of our students is much more important. I also logistically, the parking, not only for the convenience of the voters, but also just for safety reasons, of people, driving through that circle and trying to find parking and backing up. It doesn't sit well with me. So my recommendation would be to keep it as is and next year address, possibly aligning it with a half day or a day off.
I agree with Dina as well. And I also want to bring up the problem when the schools are dismissing and you have the buses and the cars trying to get to the elementary school or being around the elementary school and trying to drive out when the kids are loading the buses or the buses are exiting is possibly another challenge.
It's already a challenge.
Yeah.
So one of the things I just shared with Ryan, the calendar for next year has already been adopted. Not a big deal. It often gets revised. I would just ask that you look at it and just see what the option would be if that becomes a day off or something else that's less days, probably get back days around Memorial Day. It's no big deal. We can make that adjustment. But
If we do keep it at the multipurpose gym, I really think that, and we can work with Lori on this, is, we need to, and I know that we need parking for the voters right there, but maybe in that back row of near the multipurpose, maybe that's where you put your food trucks. Maybe you put, you can put a bounce house right on the baseball field behind it. If we keep it there, we have to bring people over there. Because last year, having all the food trucks and all the activities by the elementary school, it just, that's what brought everybody over there. For when we did the revote, because I think that's when we did the food trucks and everything. So if we can do that again, if Lori can help us do that again, activities, like we need to keep it near, like we need to give them a reason to come over.
I would say this to your point, the activities were all behind the elementary school this year. They don't have access to it. So it may kind of work itself out by happenstance, but next year there would be access to that backfield, which is where they would go. So just something to think about. So again, I can put the calendar change up next year for debate next month. See if you want to make that change.
Yep. All right, so it doesn't sound like anyone is interested in.
We will though,
Okay.
because we're going to keep it there. I will work to figure out even if we get golf carts or something like that to drive people over. We just have to get people off their rears, to be honest. That's really it. Some people were right next to it and didn't want to walk into the gym.
How many votes were we shy of it last year?
I think, yeah, I was
12.
gonna say 11.
Yeah. All right. Takes us to public comment.
Ashley? Hi, I'm Ashley Hill. I have 2 kids, soon to be 3, in the district. He's starting pre-K. I just wanted to thank the board for approving the trap update for the trap club because the 2 6th grade students who it affected had their first practice today and they went out and rocked it. I feel like the older kids kind of took them under their wing and was like, oh, this is how you do it. So the 2 younger students were very nervous and the older students, it was a nice social thing and big brother thing and big sister. There's a woman on the trap team too. But I just wanted to let you know that the 2 students that it affected this year were very appreciative of you changing it. And I think they have a pretty good chance of going to states.
No, I think
great.
that's great. And it's one of the, unfortunately, very few things that 6th graders can do just by the nature of, New York State sports and things like that. So I'm glad that the kids felt welcomed into that group.
Kate?
In the school use facilities like the new track field to gain money, holding things like sectionals to hopefully close the gap or future money bottles.
Are you talking about like renting it?
Almost like holding things like sectionals, wouldn't that make schools have to pay to come here so that we can gain money on that?
I don't. So maybe, the answer is maybe, because sometimes those events actually cost money to host. So we do, upgrading the facilities, we can definitely hold better games and people can rent out our facilities. And that's actually the policy update was how much to charge. So that if people like the Bearcats or something like that wanted to rent it, they could rent it. But I am hoping sometime we will have sectionals. That would be great to invite people into our school.
I just will add, having researched multiple school policies, they actually don't charge that much for sectionals. Other districts in general charge $400 a day for the use of the track and field, which is not very much money for the amount of use it's going to get.
How much are we charging for the use of facilities in the new policy?
It depends upon what tier you are. If you're within district, it's free. For outside of district, it's either 75, I believe, or 175 an hour.
Thomas?
With a loss of $15,000 to our O&M grounds, materials, and supplies, would we be able to maintain our brand new artificial turf field and our redone grass field behind the elementary school?
Can you say that one more time?
So earlier in the slideshow, it said that we lost $15,000 to our O&M grounds and material supplies. And I was just wondering, before we had the artificial field, the field behind the elementary school, if anyone's students played any sports at Tamarack, it might be well known that the fields weren't the best. So I was just wondering, would we have any funds set aside for future maintenance for these fields?
Yes, there's a turf maintenance program that we've got, not only for the artificial turf, but for the regular turf. But they also just put irrigation, or they're putting irrigation in. So it should be, that's why it's so darn expensive and it's taken so long. It's actually going to be in much better shape and it should last 30 years.
Thank you, okay.
I'll add too that that was one of the questions that we asked as a board, which is, are we sure that nothing that we're cutting in that $25,000, $40,000 is going to impact something that we then have to pay much more money later on to fix? So great question.
Thank you, yeah, thank you.
Eddie?
Hello, my name is Eddie. I'm a student here at Tamarack, and during my pre-periods, I often go down to the reach room with Mr. Villeneuve and volunteer my time. I see how much firsthand he benefits those kids who definitely need that extra help. I can see it firsthand. And I'm just wondering, what happens to those kids that might need that extra help in school now that that program's gone?
So I don't have a perfect answer for you right now, but we're still going to attend to the needs of those kids. We might just distribute it over more people to help out, because we want to make sure that the kids that need the most help get the most help.
Good question. Thank you.
Chris?
Hey, I'm also a student here at Tamarack. I'm just wondering about the budget. Would it be helpful if different sports throughout Tamarack did a mandatory or recommended amount of budgeting or fundraising to help support so they can get better equipment and better stuff for the teams, so you're not using as much budget for stuff that school can't pay for?
I think that's a good point. I think to some extent, I think that happens where programs raise money. I think last year we bought the baseball team might have bought a batting cage or something like that. I don't know that a school could mandate that, but we did have some pretty serious conversations about teams contributing to the use of Huddle, because Huddle is super duper expensive. So does that answer your question?
Man, the questions are really good tonight.
All right, they're top tier.
Mr.
Yeah,
Mr. Olson
top
must
tier.
have brought his all-stars
Mm.
tonight.
That's it.
Wow.
That's it.
All right. Do you need a motion to adjourn? Kevin, Tammy, all in favor? Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
shoot, make sure everybody has to sign.
Yes.
Will you just sign that?
Yes.
Yeah.